Welcome to the Super Magical Deck of the Week, where Rumham and I identify some of the decks we found to be the most exciting and ingenious in the Super Magical Cup, and we're looking to feature them in this weekly series. The first deck that we're going to look at is a Crossbow deck, the X-Bowler deck featured by Turtwig and Woody to make it all the way to the top 4 of the Super Magical Cup tournament number 5 in Season 2. And really looking to see what this deck can do. So some of the history between this deck is Turtwig actually made a Reddit post talking about this great idea he had where he took the Crossbow and the Bowler and was like, let's put the two together and see what happens. And it was very successful, Rabam.
Yeah, it's a really cool new deck that we're watching it evolve as this is the first tournament that's really had some breakout success. Woody and Turtwig played very different deck lists, but the core of the archetype really remains the same between both lists. So we're going to take a look at both lists, talk about the similarities and differences and how it works. It's a very investment-heavy siege deck. Unlike decks like Mortar, where you're trying to constantly put your mortars out, this is a very slow build-up deck that eventually creates this one single Xbow your opponent can't deal with and knocks the tower down for a 1-0 victory. Very fun, very powerful deck. We're about to jump into it. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/SuperMagicalCup.
The Crossbow isn't a new card in competitive Clash Royale, really. Ever since the game was first released, the best decks all contain the Crossbow because when it first came out, the Crossbow was insanely powerful.
Oh yeah.
You walk down the street and you guarantee the person across from you has a crossbow in his pocket, ready to draw the gun.
Yeah, you couldn't swing a Valkyrie around without hitting a Xbow mirror match.
Absolutely. And you can learn more about that in our meta timeline videos. Go take a look at how the game developed and changed, and you will see that the Crossbow was everywhere.
It was everywhere back in the day, but not so much recently.
Yeah, not so much recently. It wasn't until Supercell took a few stabs at bringing the power of the Crossbow down and upgrading the power of a few other cards, and eventually the Crossbow kind of fell out of favor. So we haven't seen it in a long time, but Woody, from the beginning of Season 2 of the Super Magical Cup, has made sure to let people know that the Crossbow is still a very viable pick, and it was kind of him alone really pioneering the card and finding success with it. And finally, Reddit Alpha as a clan has experimented and kind of tried a few different things with the Crossbow to see if they could make it work. And Turtwig and Woody made a debut performance with Crossbow Bowler, X-Bowler, in the Super Magical Cup number 5 and found really great success with it. And I think very justified too, because the Crossbow as a card, just the way it works, really forces your opponent to want to play cards inefficiently into the Crossbow because they really don't want that Crossbow to lock into the tower. So whether or not they have a good kind of tanky unit to absorb a lot of the Crossbow shots, they're kind of incentivized to play cards in front of their tower to make sure that the Crossbow doesn't damage, you know, their King Tower health.
You know, Xbow is one of those cards where you don't have the option to ignore it. Once you deploy an Xbow, there's 4 seconds until it's going to start shooting, and once it locks onto a target, it just keeps shooting until that target's dead. Your opponent is going to do everything they can to put as many troops, cards, buildings in between your Xbow and their tower to absorb that damage and try to destroy the Xbow before it rips their tower to shreds. Most all Xbow decks are centered around keeping things off of the Xbow and quickly and efficiently removing blockers between the Xbow and the tower, and that's where Bowler comes in. Woody's Xbow Rocket Valkyrie deck that he was doing well with early in Season 2 really leveraged Valkyrie as one of the key cards. You could play it behind your King Tower, it'll slowly walk up to the river, and when it does, you play the Xbow right alongside it, and then the Valkyrie stands in front both as a hit point shield and clearing up swarm units that might come in front, especially effective against barbarians, other cards like that. Well, in that situation, Bowler is just so much better. When it comes to investing elixir into the future, being expensive is good, so Bowler costing 6 is actually better than Valkyrie. Bowler's really slow when he walks, and then also he stops moving when he attacks. So if they attack the lane, he's just standing still, rolling boulders, unlike the Valkyrie who's constantly moving forward. And what that allows is for the Bowler to really let you save up elixir, so by the time he gets to the river, you definitely have the elixir to cast Xbow and other supporting troops and cards, and setting up this just perfect, powerful little Xbow that takes a whole tower down and wins the game.
The rest of the cards in the Crossbow Bowler deck is filled out with options that you would pick in terms of kind of thinking about what your opponent would play to stop your Crossbow. So whether that be minions, hey, you have Zap, you have arrows, you have fire spirits, and not only against minions, but these cards are great against chumpy units of all kinds, whether that be goblins, even archers, and in the case of fire spirits, even barbarians in some cases. They do a ton of damage, and the splash is really key in keeping those cards under control. Additionally, if you feel that your opponents are running musketeers or higher health units that the fireball can handle really well, barbarians too, the fireball is going to be your go-to option, so you can kind of pick and choose whichever options you think would be most effective against your opponent's deck and most effective against the current meta of the time. Speaking of the meta, guards and mini P.E.K.K.A. are two very, very big cards currently, and that's because giant, big body pushes are really popular right now, and mini P.E.K.K.A.s are really popular as a result of that, right? So guards and mini P.E.K.K.A. are in response to both of those things. The mini P.E.K.K.A. takes care of big bodies, and since this deck is playing a bowler, by the way, your opponent is likely going to play a mini P.E.K.K.A. to try to chop down the health of that bowler, but guess what? You have guards in your deck. Exactly. The guards are going to be so key in stopping the mini P.E.K.K.A. from doing a ton of damage just because of that shield mechanic, a really, really key card to play. And so you have reactive options like guards, mini P.E.K.K.A., zap, fire spirits, fireball, arrows, all these choices for what you can do to kind of eliminate your opponent's counter options to the crossbow. Additionally, in terms of just putting health in front of your crossbow to make sure that your opponent takes an extremely long time to get to it, you can play cards like barbarians, high health points, just a really efficient card in terms of what the health points you get for the elixir cost. Going to do a really good job of keeping troops off your crossbow and keeping your crossbow damaging your opponent's tower.
That's right. It never hurts to have more hit points between your Xbow and their attackers, because you certainly don't want anything to hit your relatively fragile 6-cost siege win condition, Well, also, Princess seems to be the other key card in the deck. I mean, we've talked about Xbow, we've talked about Bowler for the X-Bowler deck, but Princess is definitely the little sister that kind of makes it all work. She functions as kind of half of an Xbow and half of a Bowler. When back on defense, she provides long-range splash damage support to help guard your Xbow and your Bowler, and when she gets closer to the river, she sort of turns into a mini Xbow, like a mortar, right? Yeah. She gets close, she does a few little bit of chip damage that still occurs on your side of the board, forcing the opponent to come to you in the same way that Xbow forces them to come to you. So you can use Princess to set up even little miniature trades, like they try to play goblins, you zap the goblins, your Princess gets 3, 4, 5 shots on the tower. She just seems to be the really key card that helps draw it all together. But that doesn't mean that this deck is, invulnerable, for example. Absolutely. Because most of the battle takes place in their front yard, right at the river, kind of in front of their tower, the deck can sometimes struggle at removing princesses, elixir collectors, enemy cards like that that really involve you to reach deep onto their side and sort of poke and needle their backlines. This deck's not so good at doing that. And cards to be really afraid of, if you're playing this deck, are big, tough building chasers. So it's really important to have your bowler, your spells, your extra elixir, because if you just cast an Xbow, a single Hog Rider will tear that Xbow down, maybe before it even starts firing.
A Force 6 trade.
Oh, absolutely. That's the thing you're afraid of the most, right? So you need the bowler to help deal damage and knock it back and keep it off your Xbow. Other key cards that will really punish you are Giants, Royal Giant, Giant Skeleton, especially the Royal Giant. Because if they play something like a Giant in front of their tower, the Giant has twice as much hit points as the tower that the Xbow can just spend all of its bolts shooting it and maybe not even kill the thing, and definitely not kill it and the tower. So be aware of cards like that. And the spell Poison is another card that is really punishing against Xbow, because not only does it deal damage to the Xbow, it slows its attack speed, and because they have a lifespan, slowing the attack speed and dealing damage greatly reduces the amount of damage a single Xbow can do. I think that's why Woody's version runs Barbarians and Elixir Collector. Those are more cards that help draw the poison out of your opponent so that you can then safely set up your Xbow. Overall, though, super fun deck, really explosive, really powerful. When it works, it is just a blast to watch a bowler knock stuff over one after the other. It's definitely very different, something that takes advantage of the current really ground-based metagame, but is very unexpected by your opponents.
Alright, make sure you guys watch all our YouTube content and subscribe to us. If you like this video, go ahead and leave us a comment and look forward to more weekly of the Super Magical decks. Make sure to follow our Twitch channel at SuperMagicalCup.com. Over there, every Saturday at noon PST, you'll be able to see the most competitive Clash Royale being played and see some of the greatest decks like the BOWLER deck and more. So make sure you watch that and tune into the Super Magical Cup. That's it from Rumham and I. See you guys next time.